Hello, everybody. I am Danielle Broza, the digital lead for PBS Nature. Thank you so much for joining us on the PBS Nature and Jane Goodall Institute YouTube channels. I am so pleased to have the honor of introducing world-renowned ethologist and conservationist, Dr. Jane Goodall. Over 60 years ago, Jane Goodall first set foot onto the shores of what is today Tanzania's Goma National Park to begin her pioneering chimpanzee behavioral studies. In the last 6 decades, this research has transformed scientific perceptions of the relationship between humans and the rest of the animal kingdom. Today, Jane's mission has evolved into a quest to empower every individual to make the world a better place for people, other animals, and the planet we share. Jane is the United Nations Messenger of Peace and Dame of the British Empire. Her many awards are simply too numerous to list. The most recent one is becoming a 2021 Templeton Prize laureate. A prolific author, Jane's newest book, The Book of Hope, A Survival Guide for Trying Times, was recently published during the fall of 2021. Before I hand it over to Nature's executive producer, Fred Kaufman, I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us and remind you to leave any questions or comments in the chat here. We also encourage you all to subscribe to Nature's YouTube channel, Dr. Goodall's YouTube channel, and sign up for our newsletter so you can stay up to date on new episodes, digital specials, and behind the scenes content and more. I will drop a link to that in the chat now. It brings me great pleasure to welcome to the virtual stage a true global icon, Dr. Jane Goodall. Without further ado, take it away, Fred.
Dr. Goodall, what an honor to be with you, and thank you for making time for us. I can imagine how busy your schedule is, so thank you for being here. I want to start off with just an overall view of the state of wild chimpanzees today and their habitat. Is their habitat shrinking? What is going on?
Okay, well, unfortunately, the habitat is still shrinking. I've been trying to get the latest estimates of chimpanzee numbers, but they vary quite widely, depending on who you ask. One thing we do know, their numbers are still decreasing as their habitats are destroyed, as mothers are shot to steal babies for the international wildlife trade, to be sold, as pets or for entertainment. And the picture's pretty grim. On the other hand, there are many people working to improve the situation.
Well, I want to talk more about the researchers today and conservation efforts, but I want to go back and talk about how you became involved, because I find this to be a fascinating story, so ripe for a feature film. And I'm sure many people don't even know this, but you started as a secretary for Dr. Louis Leakey. I think this was back in the late 1950s. And he saw something in you and encouraged you to go to Tanzania to study wild chimpanzees. Could you reflect on that? And what did he see in you?
Well, I think we have to go back to when I was 10 years old. And when I was 10 years old, I read Dr. Dolittle and Tarzan of the Apes. And I decided I'm going to grow up, go to Africa, live with wild animals, and write books about them. And everybody. But I have to give huge credit to my amazing mother, because she said, if you really want to do something like this, you're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of every opportunity, and don't give up. And that was my introduction. So, we didn't have money for university. I had to have a job. We just had enough money for a secretarial training, got a boring secretarial job, got a letter from a school friend inviting me to Kenya, where her parents had bought a farm. That was the opportunity, saved up by working as a waitress, and got to Kenya. That's when I met Dr. Louis Leakey. And he Well, he is the one who gave me the opportunity to go and study wild chimpanzees, the first person to do that.
And why Gombe?
Well, Louis Leakey, he was a paleontologist and he was digging up the fossils of early humans, and mostly they were on a lake shore. And so Leakey thought that the chimpanzees of Gombe National Park was Gombe Stream Nature Reserve back then, but they were living on a lake shore. And so he thought this would be the best way that he could have me study the chimps. So his reasoning, which is now accepted, but was absolutely far out at the time, was if Jane finds behavior that's similar or the same in chimpanzees and humans today, maybe it was in a ape-human ancestor 6 million years ago. And maybe we brought that behavior with us on our separate evolutionary pathways. And that would give him a way of guessing how early humans behaved, because fossils will tell you a lot about, the muscle attachments, was the creature upright, tooth wear, what did it eat, and that sort of thing. But behavior doesn't fossilize.
This was so new and so groundbreaking. What instructions, advice did he give you? What was your approach when you first got there?
he didn't give me any instructions at all. He never came to Gombe. He just found the money from an American philanthropist to get me some binoculars, some supplies, and initially Tanzania was Tanganyika back then, was a British protectorate, and the authorities said a young girl on her own in the forest, absolutely no. But then Leakey never gave up, so they said, well, she can't come alone. So who came for the first 4 months? My amazing mother. I only had money for 6 months, and for the first 4 months, while my mother was there, every time I got anywhere near the chimps, they vanished into the forest. So it was pretty sad that she left just before the breakthrough observation, when I saw a chimpanzee using and making tools to fish termites from their underground nests. That was the breakthrough observation. That brought the geographic in. That provided money when the 6 months ran out.
Well, I want to get to that, but before we talk more about tool using, there are all these National Geographic photographs, film of you sitting very contently, comfortable, calmly. You look very comfortable with your binoculars, just observing the chimpanzees. Was that how you felt? Were you that comfortable in their presence, sitting in the forest?
Well, the first 4 months were terrible, because I only had money for 6 months, and for 4 whole months the chimpanzees disappeared in the forest as soon as they saw me. So it was a period when I couldn't appreciate the beauty of the forest. But it was after seeing David Graybeard using and making tools that and knowing I had money to carry on with the study, and knowing that given time I could get the chimpanzees' trust, then it was just like magic. Then I could be out in the forest world, and I could just be there and gradually get closer to the chimps and gradually learn more and more about their behavior, learn about them as individuals. And then it was a magic time in my life.
Speaking of individuals, the naming of the chimpanzees, they had F names, Flo and Fagin and Fifi. Were those your names?
Oh, yeah. when I finally was sent to university by Louis Leakey, I was told I'd done everything wrong. Oh, you should have been given the chimps names. They should have had numbers. That's scientific. And I was told you can't talk about their personalities, their minds, or their emotions because those are unique to humans. And fortunately, as a child, I had a wonderful teacher. And that teacher taught me that in this respect, those professors were wrong. That teacher is behind me here. It was my dog, Rusty. You cannot have a dog, cat, I don't care what the animal is, and not know those professors were wrong.
How often now do you get back to Gombe?
I get back twice a year. Only one chimp is left whom I knew. The others have all, they live about 40 to 50 years. And the last time I was at Gombe, this chimpanzee actually came down to the lakeshore, seemed to wait for me, and with her 2 offspring, led me up into the forest. And it was the most beautiful, amazing experience.
I'm curious, when you go back, do you reflect on your beginnings there and the history and the chimpanzees that are no longer with us, or are you simply consumed with the business of running your institute and everything else?
Well, it's a mixture. When I'm at Gombe, those early days, when I think back on them, are very nostalgic. And when I'm back at Gombe, of course I think about them. But I have to spend a great deal of energy on working with the field staff, with the research, with the research that's going on at Gombe today.
I'm interested in when you first arrived and the approach you took to studying them compared to now and the new generation of researchers that are there and the approach they're taking and what they've learned from you. What's the same and what's different?
Well, what's the same is the same emphasis on getting to know individuals. That's the same. And notes are taken about individuals. And we collect up stories because, when you're watching an individual chimpanzee, something may happen out at the side, an amazing story. And there are some scientists who will just be so concentrated on the one thing they're doing that they ignore these things, which may be something, groundbreaking. So that's the same. The difference, we now employ more technology like GIS, GPS, satellite imagery. We work with the villagers around the national park who go into their village forest reserves and monitor the health of their forest with this technology. And we're using it in our conservation research, led by Lillian Pintea, to try and collate the range of the chimps, not just in Gombe, not just around Gombe, but throughout the chimp range in Africa. And these new technologies, including drones, but most important is involving the local people, conservation-led, community-led conservation. That is actually key to what we're doing. And it works because if you try and, okay, let me go back a moment. When I flew over Gombe National Park in the late 1980s, I realized that everything had changed from when I began. 1960, Gombe was part of a huge forest belt that stretched across Africa. By the late 1980s, I looked down on a little island of forest that was Gombe National Park, surrounded by bare hills. More people than the land could support, too poor to buy food from other places. struggling to survive. Why were they cutting down the trees to make more land to grow food for their families, because their own land was becoming infertile, or to make money from charcoal or timber? And so that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people find ways of making a living without destroying the environment, we can't save chimps, forests, or anything else. And that's when we began our very holistic Take Care or Takari program, which is now throughout all the villages in the chimp range in Tanzania and 6 other African countries where the Jane Goodall Institute works with chimpanzees.
Dr. Goodall, one of the topics that viewers always seem to be most fascinated about is animal intelligence, animal emotions, consciousness, awareness. And I can't think of anybody better to reflect on that than you. I want to start going all the way back to when you first noticed tool use by the chimpanzee. Can you bring us to that moment? How far into your research and observing them did you see this? Did you know it was groundbreaking, earth-shattering at the moment? Do you remember the chimpanzee who was using, was it the blade of grass?
It was, yes. The chimpanzee is behind me here. No, where am I?
Yes?
David.
I see it.
That's,
We see it.
that's the dog, Rusty. No, David Greybeard. And I saw him reach out, pick grass stems, and scratch open the holes which the fertile termites make at the beginning of the rainy season when they fly out to form new colonies. And so the chimpanzee was scratching open this passage to the outside, pushing down this grass stem, gently pulling it out and biting off the termites, clinging on to protect their nest. And he also picked leafy twigs, and to use them as tools, he had to carefully break off the leaves and side branches. So he was using and making tools. Why was that exciting? Because back then, science assumed humans were the only tool-using, tool-making creatures. We were actually defined as man the tool user. And that was how Leakey got the National Geographic involved to give me money, carry on with the research when the initial 6 months money ran out. And did I know that it was exciting? Yes, I did. I wasn't surprised because I'd read a book called The Mentality of Apes by Wolfgang Kohler, a psychiatrist or psychologist. And he had a colony of chimpanzees in the Canary Islands. And he showed how amazingly intelligent they were, how they could solve problems, how they could use and make tools. But the scientists just said, oh, well, that's because they've learned it all from humans. They discounted it. So although I wasn't surprised, I knew that it was going to make a big stir in the scientific community, which it did.
There was a story you relayed in an interview you did.
That's David. That's
yes.
David Gray, who showed me tool using.
You talked about, this is just a great story, and I'd love for you to retell it here. It has to do with a captive chimp, but the idea, the keeper or somebody prompted it to draw a ball. And it drew something else. Do you know what I'm speaking about?
No.
Okay. It was an interview you did, and it was the chimp was given something to draw a ball, and instead of drawing a predictable...
Yes. No. Okay. And now I know what you're talking about. There were experiments teaching chimpanzees the sign language used by deaf people. And these were young chimpanzees, 3, 4, 5 years old, and they were in different families. This one 4-year-old loved drawing, and she used to fill the page with squiggles like this. And on this one day, she just drew this: up, down, up, down, up, and handed it to her teacher. And the teacher said, "Please, signed, please finish." Chimpanzee looked at the paper, pushed it back and said, or signed, "Finished." So this happened a couple of times. And then the teacher had the intelligence to say, "Sign, what is it?" And the chimpanzee signed a ball. So she was drawing the movement, the bouncing. Now, I don't believe any human would do that.
No, it's absolutely fascinating. I want to go to something that's, I know, very near and dear to you, Dr. Goodall's Roots and Shoots. Can you describe and explain that program?
Yeah. Well, I described how I began the program Tukari, which is improving the lives of the local people so that they could help us conserve the chimpanzees. In fact, they learned that protecting the environment isn't just for wildlife, it's also for their future. And so I was going around the world and I was collecting, trying to raise money for these programs. But I realized that if we didn't give children the information that they need to grow up into a better world, there was no point. So that's when I began the Roots and Shoots program back in 1991. And it began with 12 high school students in Tanzania. And today it's in 70 countries around the world. It has members from kindergarten through university. And the main message is each one of us makes an impact on the planet every single day. And we can choose what sort of impact we make. Because I learned in the rainforest that everything is interconnected, each Roots and Shoots group chooses, they choose. It's not top down. They choose 3 projects that they care about: one to help people, one to help animals, one to help the environment. Roll up their sleeves and take action. And they are changing the world.
Yeah, they're the future. I want to get to some, I know there are several questions in the chat. It's one question I have, I'm very curious about. If it wasn't chimps, what would have been your second choice? Or looking back, what would be your second choice of an animal to study?
Okay, I suppose I didn't choose chimps, Leakey did. Probably hyenas. I did spend quite a few months with hyenas when my son was very small and it wasn't safe for him to be at Gombe. And hyenas are the most fascinating animals. But, you know, when I went to Africa, I would have studied anything. And I've had amazing times studying warthogs. I've studied mongooses. And, you know, all these animals are so fascinating. And we're learning all the time more and more about them, learning how more and more animals are showing signs of intelligence, even insects. So we're just, everything's different from when I went to Cambridge University and was told that I'd done everything wrong. You know,
I would have thought you would have said elephants. I was wrong.
well, elephants would be wonderful, but I find hyenas even more exciting.
We're getting toward the end of our chat, but doing a little bit of research and reading more about you, there is a word that comes up quite often, and that is hope. And I want you to, it's hard to be hopeful these days with what's going on in the world. But if you are, that's quite encouraging. Tell us what there is to be hopeful about.
Well, first of all, my my first reason for hope is the young people, because literally once they understand the problem and we empower them to take action, they really are changing the world. And they're so full of enthusiasm, and they're dedicated to the projects that they choose. So that's one. Secondly, this incredible brain of ours, it's the biggest difference between us chimps and all other animals is the explosive development of the intellect. So though we know other animals are very intelligent, I mean, think what we've done, the internet, sending rockets up to Mars with little robot taking photos, learning about the universe. I mean, all these amazing things, which makes it absurd that we, the most intellectual beings ever on this planet, surely are destroying our only world. But we are beginning now, science is beginning to use these brains to find ways to live in greater harmony. Individuals are beginning to think about our own environmental footprint, like moving towards a plant-based diet because of the horrible harm that's done by this eating of large amounts of meat, along with the cruelty of the intensive farms, the methane gas adding to the greenhouse gases. And then the next reason for hope, nature is so amazingly resilient. So destroy a place, give nature time and maybe some help, nature will come back and once again make the place beautiful. And there's so many examples of that, so many incredible people that I have the great joy of meeting as I travel 300 days a year around the world. And you can't help but feel hopeful when you see a place that was literally down to bedrock, and then with this careful help from people and nature's resilience, nature comes back. The insects, the birds, the mammals come back. And then finally, there's what I call the indomitable human spirit, the people who tackle what seem impossible, don't give up, and the impossible becomes possible. And I know so many people like that. So although right now with the wars and the conflicts, it is difficult to be hopeful every minute of every day. We've been through times like this before and come through them. I think because I was a very small child during World War II, when it seemed that Britain was going to be lost to Nazi Germany, because we were the only European country that wasn't defeated or had capitulated. And all we had was Churchill. Churchill with his speeches. Churchill saying we will fight them on the streets and in the towns, and we'll never give up. And Germany did not overrun Britain. So I think that living through that experience taught me a lot about human evil, but it also taught me a lot about human resilience and determination, and that in spite of everything, we can work through.
Thank you for that. And finally, for the audience watching this and everyone else, what could they do if they want to be helpful in chimp and habitat conservation and helping the species? What advice can you give us?
Well, different people obviously can help in different ways. People with lots and lots of money can help by making donations. Children can do and are doing bake sales and things like that to raise the money to become a chimp guardian in one of our sanctuaries, because we have to look after the orphan chimps whose mothers are being shot, so that they can steal the babies and sell them, and we confiscate them. The governments confiscate them. And so each one of us, We can think about our environmental footprints every day. What do we buy? How was it made? Let's ask questions. Did it harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals? Is it cheap because of unfair wages? Don't buy it. Does it cost a little bit more? Yes, but if it costs a bit more, you value it more and you waste less. The waste, human waste, is horrible. And so every one of us in our way, and thinking about what we care about, we can all make a difference.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk with us. A true honor for me to be able to ask you some questions. Thank you. I'm not sure if you're aware, but PBS Nature, we're working with the BBC on a film on the chimps of Gombe, currently called The Ape Queen. And we'll have that ready in probably less than 2 years. And I hoped that you'll be able to join us again and reflect back on the stories of the chimpanzees there and your work. A true honor to be with you today. Thank you. And Danielle, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yes, thank you, Fred, and thank you so much, Dr. Goodall, for that really fascinating conversation. My mother's name was Florence, so I always loved Flo, the chimp. We really appreciate you being here today and for all the work you've done and continue to do to make the world a better place for humans and animals. For more information on Dr. Goodall and her work, you can go to janegoodall.org. We will also post this fantastic interview and more about chimpanzees and Dr. Goodall's work on the PBS Nature YouTube channel. So make sure you're subscribed and also subscribe to the PBS Nature newsletter. I will put that in the chat as well. Thank you again, everyone, for joining and for your really interesting questions and your lovely comments about Dr. Goodall. And we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, and bye.